morning, champions all over the state of Texas, if not all over the globe. I'm Rita Santamaria. I'm the owner, the founder of Champion School of Real Estate. And as you may or may not know, every month we have something special and complimentary for all of our customers of Champion School of Real Estate. And today I am so very, very pleased that we have Jasmine Quinerly. Jasmine is a general certified appraiser, very experienced. She also has a broker's license. And as well, she is one of our longtime instructors. But we're going to get into all of those wonderful issues and facts about appraisal that agents and new prospective agents have all been wondering and curious about. I know today you're going to take away so many good pieces of information that will help you in your business. But first of all, I do want to give a shout out to all of our campuses. And I know that they are tuned in today, many of the classes where it's appropriate for them to have an hour of good appraisal information. So first of all, hello to Plano, Fort Worth.
Yeah.
We come down to Austin, and then we go over to San Antonio, and then back to Houston, if not all over the state of Texas, because we have live broadcast that hits every single area where you might be wanting to take a class at your home office. So don't forget, it's all about you at Champion School of Real Estate. Whether you take real estate, loan, appraisal, inspection, business etiquette, and now coaching. We have had so many new agents, but mainly experienced agents, that have said, I hear about coaching, I need a coach, I want a coach, how do I do that? And we have an incredible, great experience because you will be able to have as your personal trainer coach one who is already doing it, has been doing it for a number of years with many professionals, many athletes. He travels along with John Maxwell, and as you know, John Maxwell has written many books. This is one of my favorite, How Successful People Think. So his name, our new coach that will start in July, his name is Logan Stout. If you were with us for the Barbara Corcoran event in Austin, you know that Logan was the kickoff speaker, and he has been training so many wonderful, professional, successful people for the last number of years, and we wanted to bring him in as the opportunity for our students to come to the next level and have a personal trainer coach. So soon you're going to be getting an e-blast, and the e-blast is going to list these amazing people. He will be interviewing 90 minutes once a month beginning in July, and each one has their own emphasis on grit, staying in the game, how to bring your game to the next level. But it will all and is all sales oriented. Per session, it's only $35. Now, by July 1, it's $150 for all 5 speakers that he will be talking with. And yes, it is live broadcast. After July 1, it's $35 per class. So I want you to be looking for this, sitting on your desktop. It's going to come across with a short little video from Logan. And as well, you'll see who the speakers are. And they are very, very dynamic and well known. And we're so happy to be able to bring Logan in as a trainer and coach. Today, I have, as I mentioned earlier in the introduction, Jasmine. And Jasmine, I'm so happy to have you here today for me to pick your brain. You are such a SMED, a subject matter expert.
Oh,
you are.
That's good to know.
I just want to tell you, I've personally used Jasmine on my personal property to give an appraisal prior to listing it, because I knew that she would come forward with the absolute value that I could look forward to getting an offer on. And as well, she is one of our lead appraiser instructors that we snagged in. She's contract because her full-time job is being a general certified appraiser, and she is out there in the residential world all day long. So that being said, Jasmine, I'm just going to throw this out from the get-go.
Okay.
How many years have you been doing appraisal, and why did you want to be an appraiser?
Well, I started appraising in the 70s, about 1977, prior to licensing. And the way I got into the industry is that my father had a large sales staff.
Mm-hmm.
And he did not want my brother and I to be in competition with the sales staff. He didn't want to hear any complaints about nepotism.
Oh.
So rather than sell, we sold for the 2 years to get our broker's license, and that exposed you to the whole arena of sales so that you understood financing, you understood buyers and sellers and the market. And then after the 2 years were up, or a little bit past that, then I went back and got my broker's license. And when I got my broker's license, then I began to appraise. And so we began to do work for VA and FHA and the city of Houston.
So let me interrupt just 1 second, because I want to make sure our brand new people in the classroom hear this answer. You're a broker, you sell your own property, are you going to be able to appraise it?
Oh, no.
No.
I'm glad you brought that up. We don't appraise what we sell, and we don't sell what we appraise.
There you go.
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, because you want to be an independent voice.
Yes.
We're an independent voice. And so you would, there would be some conflict of interest if you appraise what you sold.
Exactly.
Right.
And we like to talk about that just very simplistically for those of you that are licensed already. You know this, but we remind all of our new people that you could be an inspector and also have a real estate license, but you're not going to inspect your own property. That would be a conflict of interest. Loan officer, real estate agent, the same thing. Yes, you can have multiple licenses, but for goodness sake, don't use all of them at the same time. Pick your specialty so you don't have a compromise in your integrity or your ethics as far as that's concerned.
That's exactly right.
So talking about just the transaction from the get-go. I'm an agent and I'm conversing with my buyer on the process. And I tell them, when you find the house you want to buy, you will need to be prepared to talk to the loan officer, and you will need to be prepared to pay for an appraisal. So tell me, if you would, what your conversation would be with that buyer and how the process works on your side as the appraiser. Who chooses you, the appraiser? Who do you report to? Who is your fiduciary relationship with? All of that.
Well, the lender hires the appraiser, and we actually do work for him because the lender wants to be protected. In case the buyer does not pay, the lender will want to come back and take the property and get his money back. So we protect him, and that's who hires us. They hire us either directly, or they use appraisal management companies to hire the appraiser, so that there is some distance, as it would, between the seller, the agent, and the appraiser.
Now, when you talk about appraisal management company, sometimes that's a little gray area. How does that work, appraisal management company?
The appraisal management company is to be a middle person between the appraiser and the lender, so that the lender doesn't, or there's no pressure from the lender onto the appraiser to give him the value that he wants. We want to make so many deals, and so we want the appraiser just to give us a number so that we can close our deals. And appraisers, or what we found historically, is that appraisers trying to get business would please the lender so that they could continually get appraisals and appraisal assignments. And so the appraisal management company is set up there to be that distance. So The management company is going to review and make sure that the appraiser is doing his work correctly and he is not trying to appeal to the lender to get a series of work. So that's the bridge there, to make sure that
sort
the
of
consumer
like
gets
an arm's length
distance.
separation.
Yes.
So we understand that the appraiser works with a lender, but at the same time, we know that the real estate agent can be very helpful in helping the appraiser do their job and still keep an arm's length.
That's correct.
So what are real estate agents able to do and keep everybody happy?
Well, let's start at the beginning. Let's start with the seller. The listing agent is going to list the property with the seller. In some instances, the market is so complicated or there are not many sales in the area, and what the agent can do is get a pre-appraisal. And so he can go in and have the seller hire an appraiser, and the appraiser can look at the market and tell them what the pitfalls would be in this particular market, and give them an idea of what the property could be priced at to sell, because the agents really want to sell the listing, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's the goal.
So they will come in and do that pre-appraisal, and then the seller can be very realistic about his property. Because we have to remember, sellers live there for a long time. They love their house. And they think the things that they have put in the house, or the things that they enjoyed in the house, will be the things that other people enjoy, or the amenities that other people enjoy. And that may not be true. Then the other thing the agent can do is to make a list of changes and renovations and remodeling projects that the seller has done on the house in the last 10 to 15 years, so that they can have that list ready for the appraiser and say, well, we put in new floors, or we put in new lighting, or summer kitchen, and those additions. Because when we come to the house, we see the summer kitchen there. It takes a real trained eye to see whether that summer kitchen was put in last year or 6 years ago. So if you tell us that it was put in and when it was put in, then it helps everybody.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about the agent giving you comparable property sales, CMAs, that they put together on properties that sold within, we like to say, the last 6 months, and or even, as soon as possible, close to the date that this particular buyer wants to close, and having those available in the house for you to pick up, or giving them to you in advance? How do you feel about that?
I personally like it because it gives me an idea of how the agent assigned the list price to the property. So it works well for me. But I will tell you that not all appraisers appreciate that.
Okay.
So you can leave it, and it's good to leave it, because the appraiser can review it and see what sales that you considered when you listed the property. But don't be offended if the appraiser just leaves it, because the appraiser still wants to be independent, and they don't want somebody to feel that they have been swayed one way or another by the agents. So it's a two-thought process in the appraisal industry. Some appraisers appreciate it, they review it, they still do their own work. Right. Some don't want to be influenced by it, and so they leave it so that they keep that independence. So it will vary from appraiser to appraiser. And that's the reality of that.
So for those of you sitting in class right now or at your home office, the 3 things that she mentioned was a pre-appraisal, and then make a list of any additions to the house that the appraiser may not be aware of, especially, as Jasmine said, if there's been an addition like a summer kitchen or a brand new roof, the date that these new things were done to the property.
Right.
And that's going to help a lot. You did your wonderful CMAs, we hope and believe, when the listing agent, put the house on the market. And the CMA with the subject property compared to other recently sold properties. You might tell the appraiser that they're available for them if they want to use them, and often agents just put them in the house in a folder, and then it's up to you if you want to see how close or far away we are in that agreement. But I know most agents do that because it seems to be that most appraisers like that, or they will even ask for it.
Yeah, many of them do. So,
yeah. So moving into the house and adding different features to it, just recently I saw an email that I feel as though you would be the expert to answer this question. And the agent was fairly new, and she was saying to me, the seller was so very disappointed that the brand new beautiful pool that they put in with the beautiful spa and the fountain, that they were not going to be able to get all of their money back on putting that in. And she asked me what the rule of thumb was. So I invited her to join us today. I know she's listening. And I said, let's have our general certified appraiser answer that. What can the seller expect with adding a pool to the property they purchased years back?
Well, one of the things that we want to say, it is your house, so you certainly want to put in any amenities in your house that you enjoy. But you need to know that cost and value are two different things. So you can spend $40,000 to put in a brand new pool and the spa and all of those wonderful things. But when you get ready to sell, the appraiser looks at market value. So then we have to consider what other buyers would pay for that property. And it's not a new pool when they get ready to buy it. So there's some discount because of depreciation. There's some discount because not everybody wants a pool or desires a pool as much as you did. So then we go in and we have to look at what the market says about that pool. And so it does not always return an increase in value. And unfortunately, you do need to know that sometimes the things that you add to your house as a pool may even be a negative. We have to remember that in some subdivisions, you already have a community pool. So your house is then paying for two pools. So it's a burden of ownership. And then the buyer coming in, or the potential buyer, may not even value that pool at all because they've got to pay for two.
I hope so much that our listeners today will go to YouTube. By the end of the day today, we'll have our interview on YouTube. And I hope you all replay that, because the words that came out of Jasmine's mouth are wonderful words to parrot to the seller when you're sitting down at the listing appointment. And they are saying, and look, we put in this wonderful, great, whatever, $80,000 pool feature and everything that makes it look so awesome. And obviously the answer is, that's fantastic. It makes your house so beautiful and you've enjoyed it. And perhaps for a buyer that's focused on this neighborhood, that might make the difference between house A and your house, Mr. Seller, if they want the pool. But at the same time, having that conversation that Jasmine just had about, we already have a community pool, it just allows the seller to have some of that conversation in their brain. So when you, the agent, are ready to negotiate, and maybe that comes up with your seller that, wait, we spent $80,000 already, they've had the conversation that it may not be the winning reason, or they may not get all their money back.
That's correct. And again, the pool depreciates over time. So you spent $80,000 10 years ago, but that pool depreciates, so you can't get your $80,000 back.
No, that's right, because it is a depreciating.
It's a depreciating factor. And then the other thing is, we need to know that in some neighborhoods, pools are real desirable. And folks will pay extra for it.
And they expect it.
And they expect it in certain neighborhoods. But there are some neighborhoods where you have to consider the buyer's cost of ownership. He has to pay extra taxes. He has to have additional water bill. He'll have additional electric bills. His insurance will go up. And the burden of owning that pool may be prohibitive in some markets. So we can't always say that the pool or those kinds of amenities are going to add, or going to add even near what you paid for.
Well, then let's talk about value for a minute. And I hope our students have paper and pen out right now, or iPad out, and take some notes on this. You are an agent, you are getting ready to list a property, you want to place the correct listing price on the property. What are the different areas that an agent should consider as they are deciding at what list price should I suggest to the seller they list their house?
The first thing I want to say is be very realistic. I know everybody is in competition trying to get that listing.
Mm-hmm.
But the seller needs to know that his house is going to be in competition with other houses in the neighborhood. So you need to look at what is already on the market, and you certainly need to look at what has sold in the last 6 months. One of the biggest mistakes and one of the bigger problems that separate agents from appraisers' numbers is that price per square foot. We
talk about that for a
We
minute.
do teach the price per square foot, where people take the sales price. An agent will take the sales price divided by the square footage of the house and come up with the price per square foot. The problem gets to be, if you do that for a 1,700 square foot house, and you come up with a big number, you know, it may come up to 207 per square foot, and then you apply that 207 to a 2,300 square foot house, then it exacerbates the price. And that's, the people are not going to pay that difference.
It's not apples to apples.
It's not apples to apples. What you need to do is make the comparison between houses that are very close in square footage.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to use the price per square foot, it's more reflective if you're using 3 houses that are about 2,300 square feet, or 3 houses that are about 1,800 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
If it's less than 100, 150 square feet difference, it works. The price per square foot works. But the bigger problem is, we'll take a smaller house, price per square foot will give us a big number, and then we apply it to a big house, and that puts the price over.
Excellent point, because agents sell in all different neighborhood price ranges.
That's
So you may be in Sugar Land in the upper square footages of 5,000 square feet, but then the next day you may be in another neighborhood in Sugar Land and it may be 2,300 square feet. So make sure you're saying that it's apples to apples per the neighborhood if you're going to use square footage.
That's correct.
And you know, it seems like a lot of buyers want to use square footage, square footage, square footage. And they tend to sometimes not listen to the agent so much when they say, well, we do comparable property sales, and yes, square footage is an indicator, but in residential, not so much as what the market sold for.
That's correct. That's correct.
List price to sales price is such a great percentage that buyers and sellers, especially sellers, love to see. And I say that because a lot of agents use that in their marketing material. It's their history showing of the properties they've listed, what the ending sale price was. So if sale to list is 98%, it says, wow, they're doing a pretty good job knowing how to list that property. So if you are a buyer, for example, you might want to go ahead and be sure and make your questions to the agent you're going to work with, you know, what is your sale to list percentage? But especially as an agent in the business, when you start having a track record and you're trying to market yourself, be sure and advertise your sale to list percentage, which says, hey, I'm pretty darn good at doing this. I've got it down pretty well.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some issues with property. The real situations that are out there. So you are that agent that is at 98% sale to list ratio. You do a darn good job putting your CMA package together, your comparative market analysis, and the property is listed at the looks to be perfect price. And in fact, you get an offer on it, let's say, within 7, 9, 10 days. And the offer is right at list price. But the buyer, of course, ends up paying for the appraisal. And now the property appraises, let's say, $20,000 less than what it sold for. And this is a really typical situation, but not so much in today's world because we have a great market. But it does happen, certainly, on a daily basis. So, Jasmine, what are the options or alternatives for the buyer, for the agent, for the seller? It just didn't appraise.
Just didn't appraise. Well, a couple of things can happen. The buyer can, as always, pay more. The seller can reduce his price. Or the seller can appeal the appraisal. The seller says, well, listen, I think the price is right. I think the contract is right. The buyer wants to pay. There were other people who were interested in the property at the list price. So I don't think that we're wrong. So we want to appeal the appraisal.
Okay, step back just a minute. Because with our brand new people here, when you say the buyer can pay more, what do you mean by that?
The buyer can pay cash over what the lender, what the lender will lend.
Right.
The appraisal.
Right, and sometimes that happens.
It does, and it happens for a lot of reasons. Sometimes the buyer wants that property because it's close to his mother-in-law, or it's close to work, it's close to, and so he can pay that. If he's got the cash money and the neighborhood means that much to him, or the house means that much to him, he can pay over the appraisal value, and the appraiser supports that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or the seller can drop his price.
The seller can say, "Oh, I'll take a little less," or if he needs to sell, it's time to sell. I need to go, and so.
And even that combination, the seller drops it a little bit, and the buyer comes up with a little more cash. Whatever makes the lender happy in that situation.
That's correct. That's correct. So those things.
Now,
can
what
happen.
about going back? The agent goes back to the lender and says, I have all this evidence that it really should have appraised for more. We know the buyer would have to pay for a new appraisal. How often do you see the lender saying, okay, we'll do another appraisal?
Not as often. Most times, if there is a mistake, let's go back to the appeal process, because perhaps there's something that the appraiser missed. Perhaps he did make a mistake. You know, I know that's shocking to many of I know that's shocking to people. The appraiser made a mistake. Yes, it can happen. So you can go in and say, listen, appraiser, let me tell you some things that you missed. Again, that's why I say it's better to prepare in the beginning. So if you give us the information about the additions and new things that are coming in for the homeowners association, or some amenities that are coming in the community, if you know those things and you tell the appraiser up front, the appraiser can look at it and see if it's going to have an impact on value. If we have that up front, it may make a difference. But perhaps the appraiser missed it. Then you can come back and say, listen, this was added last year, or this was added 2 years ago, and the other properties don't have it, or this property is in this school district and you missed it and you put it in the wrong other school district, and that does not have the same appeal. Those kinds of things can be brought to the attention of the lender. The lender brings that to the attention of the appraiser. The appraiser can review his process and see if there's something that needs to be corrected.
Exactly.
Okay, now, if that does not work, the appraiser says, well, I still think that what I did was good and I'm not going to change, then if the buyer wants to, the buyer can ask the lender to do a second appraisal, and a second appraisal can be ordered. Now, many times that second the appraisal is not going to be paid for by the buyer, and we do know that all things are negotiable. Sometimes when they have to have that second appraisal done, I see that the seller and the buyer may come together to share that cost. Now, sometimes the buyer has the money and he can do it again, but sometimes the seller says,
option.
I'm fighting for my value, and so they may pay for it, and then sometimes the two of them come together to pay for that second appraisal if it is warranted. Now, remember, the lender wants to be in the best position, so they have to be on board too, that this second appraisal is going to be beneficial to them, because they don't want to be overextended, because unfortunately
they're the one that's giving all the money basically to buy a house, so they need to be in a good position with their investment.
That's right.
So if we move into Houston, Texas right now, and we move into the aftermath of horrible Hurricane Harvey, and we move into the fact, those of you living outside of Houston and our other wonderful metros around the state, just driving into work every day, I always pass neighborhoods that are still
trying to recover,
still empty homes, and people in the remodel state of having to have their home brought back to the status or the state where they can live in it. So what has that done to appraisers who are going to these houses when they sell? And in the past, the neighborhood sold beautifully or of market value, but now because of Harvey, they had whatever 5, 6, 8 feet of water. How does the appraiser deal with those properties, or how are you dealing with them?
Well, I want to send a big thank you out for those who are working in this market now, because we love it when we read in MLS, house did not flood, because then you tell us, they tell the appraiser, listen, this neighborhood did flood, but this house or this section of the house, this section of the neighborhood did not flood. That's good information for appraisers. Otherwise, then we have to do quite a bit of research to find out, did this house flood? And so we rely on you all telling us about flooded neighborhoods. So we appreciate the listing agent putting that in MLS and making that available on your listings. So big thanks to you. That's appraisers love that. The other thing that the appraiser has to do is to look and see what impact Harvey had on communities. There are some communities where the whole neighborhood flooded, the whole subdivision flooded. We know that, and we know the impact of those communities. But there are some communities where 2 blocks flooded and the rest of the neighborhood did fine, or the neighborhood had some flooding in the back and not in the front. And so we will have to compare to see how the houses that flooded are doing on the market, and how the neighborhood is doing where no flooding occurred.
Have we had enough time to see that yet?
Not yet. We see some. There's some neighborhoods where the demand was so great before Harvey, that water will not wash away that demand. And so there's still neighborhoods where people are coming in and saying, I still want to live in this neighborhood because it's a great neighborhood, and we couldn't have gotten in here if the values hadn't dipped a little bit.
I'm looking at one of our questions that we do have on our other screen through chat. And one of the questions that came up is, my house is in a neighborhood that flooded, but my seller's house did not flood, but the neighborhood, the majority of the neighborhood homes did flood. And this person would like to know, how do you regard that house that is on the market for sale? The one that didn't flood, but in the neighborhood that did.
It did. Well, the first thing we look at, and we hope that there's some other houses that sold in that neighborhood. If not, remember, we still can use competing neighborhoods. So there are some other neighborhoods that did have sales in it. We go into those neighborhoods and we see the price differential between houses that did flood and houses that didn't flood. And so you do that repeatedly so that you come up with a percentage of market difference that buyers will make. And then you come to your neighborhood and apply it.
Okay.
So
you're working with a percentage.
yes.
Okay. All right. I know that has hit so many homeowners. So again, talking about Houston and this area for just a minute, property taxes. I know that so many homeowners are saying, well, hold the boat now. I got hurt over here by Harvey, my neighborhood flooded, but my property tax stayed the same as it did prior to the flood. So what do you think? I know this is just your opinion because you're not part of the appraisal district, but what would you tell homeowners about property tax reductions or deductions?
The appraisal district looks at your property as of January 1. So if January 1 your house was in disrepair, you certainly needed to let them know that my house has been flooded or it's been impacted because of Harvey. And as of January 1, they would make note of price reductions. And you have from January 1 till today, this year, May 15th, in order to appeal your value that you received. Normally,
and there's that little caveat, or 30 days from the time you got your letter.
That's right.
On your property tax estimates. So
you may have a little time.
Prove when you got that letter, and it is whichever is the later. But it seems like it would be a tough thing to prove. But with the new law, as you mentioned, it used to be the end of May. Now it's today, May 15th.
May 15th.
Or the 30 days. So go ahead.
So you go in and you appeal and you say, listen, my house is not the same house as it was pre-Harvey. This is post-Harvey. And let me, and before you start doing your repairs, you should take pictures. And so you have pictures of the water stains and the water damage to the house prior to doing the repair. So January 1, it was not repaired. So you have that you can take to the appraisal district for appeal and go in with your pictures to show them. And they've been pretty good at doing reductions on that. The other thing is look at what's going on in your neighborhood. Again, if you are the only house that didn't flood in your neighborhood and the other houses flood, then again you go in and say, listen, my house is in pretty good shape, but I want you to see what has happened around me. And I could not sell my house, or the market value that you have on it would not be realistic in a neighborhood where so many houses are impacted, because there is market perception.
Exactly.
So your house didn't flood, but if we have market perception that this subdivision...
Exactly, and that's what the news media really hurt so many neighborhoods with, the perception. We have another one, and again, as I'm looking over at the screen from time to time, I apologize, but we have another question that came up, and the agent said, in this type of market we have, which I just read from the Real Estate Center this week, that the number of inventory of homes on market is just a little over 3 months, which definitely makes it a seller's market.
Right.
And frankly, all over the state, it's within that particular 3 month or less even inventory. But she was asking the question on chat. So she put her house on the market for the sellers. The sellers got multiple offers. And the seller then says to the agent, I have 3-4 offers on the property. I think you listed the property for too little money. And question being, when you are in an aggressive seller's market that we have right now, do you have words of wisdom for the listing agent in the conversation with the seller that yes, there may be multiple offers, however, may not still appraise at that high auction
number,
price.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It may not, because until we get a history at that higher number, the appraiser always has to look at history. We've got to look at what sellers have already gotten in the market in the last 6 months. So if that's been at $300,000 and the bidding gets to going over $300,000, the appraiser has to be able to support $325,000, $335,000.
Exactly.
And if we can't support it,
It's still market.
it's still market. Yeah.
So on the front end, especially our new people listening, that's one of the conversations you want to have with your sellers is, please don't come back to me once we get an offer and it's above list price and say you didn't do your job. No, it is supply and demand, and yet Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that house still has to appraise. So yes, you're in great shape with multiple offers, and we teach you how to work multiple offers in our contracts class, but at the same time, it must still appraise. So now I have a great case study I want to give you.
Okay.
Happened just recently, and from an experienced agent, one of those nightmares. So every step of the way, Jasmine, I want you, when I finish giving you the scenario, tell us what might have happened that would have made it better.
What went wrong?
What went wrong? And it's such a true real-life situation that will help everybody. Buyer moves into their wonderful new neighborhood. They purchase their home. And one of the wonderful things they loved about the home was that the seller had converted the garage into a nice game room. Now, as you and I both know, most buyers don't like that. They want their garage. This buyer happened to buy it because it was a wonderful, well-done, converted garage. Some aren't so well done. So they are now in the house for 3 weeks. They get a letter from the HOA saying that the seller had violated the deed restrictions. In fact, they show letters they had sent to the seller saying, put the house back in its prior condition with the garage. Seller totally paid no attention to it. So now new buyer gets the letter saying the deed restriction has been violated. You cannot have a converted garage in this neighborhood. So, many questions. Who's liable, seller or buyer? How could it have been prevented? And what is your opinion as an appraiser on converted anything?
Converted anything. We'll talk about DIY in just a minute for sure. But the who's liable? Unfortunately, the buyer has gotten a copy of the deed restrictions, and the agent should have gone over that when you buy in a neighborhood and you have deed restrictions. The buyer's agent really ought to have some conversation about what you can and cannot do in this neighborhood. So a lot of restrictions in those CC&Rs that are in your deed restrictions. You know, whether you convert a garage or whether you can have a Doberman pigeon in that neighborhood. There are lots of things
So
in there.
listing agent should have questioned the seller when they saw the house and said,
Yeah. Now,
you've got a converted garage here.
But our buyer's already in the house.
Oh, yeah.
So we want to make sure that the buyer's agent knows that he should do some research also.
Perfect.
Okay. Seller and the seller's agent. When you list a property and there have been conversions and additions on the house, there are a couple of questions that you need to ask. Was it permitted? Did you go to the homeowners association? Does your homeowners association say when you do major repairs to your house, you need to run it by the homeowners association's planning and building committee? Many associations have a standing committee that approves color and paint and additions to houses. And so you may need to go through that committee before you make those capital investments in your property. So listing agents, you need to have that conversation. And again, and I want to say this about the homeowners association. The homeowners association's deed restrictions about those additions are to protect the whole community. Because sometimes when the house is built, the electrical, the plumbing that goes into the garage is not as detailed, or it's not as strong to be living space.
Could even be a honeydew,
It could
yeah,
Yeah.
transformation from the patio to
A garage, yes.
to a garage. I mean, the patio to like a garden room or something like that. And the weekend warrior does it himself.
That is true. So those kinds of things, the homeowners association wants to make sure that you don't do anything that would cause a fire or would
Exactly.
be dangerous to you, the residents, and to the residents that live around you. So making you come, or asking you to come before them to get approval or to get permits, is for the good of the greater community. So I want to support the homeowners association in their charge to protect. The other thing is, when your buyer moves in, the buyer wants to or is mandated to follow the homeowners association's requirements. So as soon as you can get a copy of that homeowners association document and share it with the seller to make sure that they're in compliance, and to share it with the buyer and the buyer's agents, then we're going to eliminate those kinds of problems.
Now, what about the appraiser? The appraiser goes out, looks at the property, because they have to appraise before we close. And appraiser didn't say anything. Are there any repercussions on that side?
It is. The appraiser looks and should be in tune with the homeowners associations and the restrictions in that neighborhood. And so typically, and we know, we can pretty much tell when it's done and it's not in compliance, because the garage door is still there. The conversion is there, and the garage door, it still looks like a garage from the outside. That's a red flare for the appraiser.
Mm-hmm.
So why didn't you make it blend into the front? Why didn't you change the architectural design of it? Oh, you didn't because you couldn't. You had to make it look that way. So the appraiser may not even value the conversion. We're going to treat that as a garage that needs to be converted back.
It's actually a negative.
It's a negative.
Mm-hmm.
So we take the garage, we make it a garage, and then we figure in the cost of converting it back to a garage.
This is such good conversation for all of our potential agents, because you will have that buyer that says to you, oh, this is great. It's a 3-car garage. We only need a 2-car. We're going to take that other garage and turn it into something else. Red flag. You need to make sure, buyer's agent, as you said, that it would be allowable by the deed restrictions. And then as well, it's a good conversation to have with the buyer to say, that really is something you need to decide if you want for your own family to enjoy, because most buyers, when you go to sell now, most buyers are going to want it to be a 3-car garage. So you'll probably have to put it back again. So every step of the way, but ultimately, I wanted to end that discussion with seller in the house. He violated the deed restriction. Listing agent should have apprised him or her of that. And then along comes buyer's agent and should have, could have questioned the conversion. But ultimately, we know it has to be fixed to keep the HOA happy. We could call it HOA. There are also townships that have the same restrictions. So that is certainly a real world scenario.
And in addition to that, Rita, when you are listing the property, agents, when you're listing the property, and the seller said that they did work on the house themselves, then you begin to ask them, are you a carpenter by trade, or are you a contractor by trade, or were permits required when you did this kind of work? That lets the selling agent prepare buyers that come in, and he can say, listen, the seller put in the fireplace himself. Well, buyer's agent, ask about that. Why, what, was he?
We have a good add-on question to this that came from one of our students. They are listing, or they have listed, a builder's model. And you know, builders, when they do the model, they convert the garage. The builder did not convert it back to a garage because the buyers love the model with the converted garage. So, anything different from what we've talked about that you would add to that particular situation?
I sure would, and I've appraised a house like that. I've appraised a model home where the garage wasn't converted back. The problem gets to be when that house sold, then the driveway did not lead into the house adequately, and it became a market resistance to that. The other thing that happens is the homeowners association may still say it cannot be a add-on, and so when the property sold, maybe 6 years after the original buyer had it, there was market resistance, and so it was easy to go in and see that sales price or list price was one number, but the offers that came in on the property were much less. So, because they did want a garage, the new owners wanted a garage and just did not like the appeal of having a living space and having to get out and carry groceries in without that garage.
Well, for this agent right now that has the listing, my advice to them would be go straight to the HOA deed restrictions.
And
make sure that you read them and then have the builder convert it back to a garage if in fact it's in violation, because we know sometimes they will give a period of time for a builder to go ahead and have that model be a conversion for a sales office.
That's correct.
And then they have to put it back. So, and we also got some great comments on how much they have enjoyed this morning.
Oh, good.
And it's been very informative, and I absolutely know that it has been informative because Jasmine is so experienced, and she most definitely has helped our new and experienced agents with day-to-day situations that can happen. So just on a really short little note, if someone listening says, gosh, I'd like to be an appraiser, can you tell them what the requirements are right now?
Well, right now you do need to have a degree if you're going to come into the appraisal industry, or an associate's degree. So that has to be factored in, but we've got classes that you take in order to become a trainee, and then you're going to walk with a seasoned appraiser so that you get trained on all of the ethics and how to handle the complicated properties in the market. And you will walk with him until you've got 2,500 hours of experience. And then you can finish up your classes and take an exam that we prepare you to take. Our appraisers do very well when they go to their state exam. And that's how you get in the appraisal industry.
And don't let that associate's degree scare you off. If you don't have a degree, because believe it or not, the AQB changed those rules, not for right now. Jasmine's telling you how it is right now. But it looks like that come the first of the year, there will be additional educational hours that you can take. And my personal opinion on that is, as I've mentioned many times, I think they recognized that we don't have enough appraisers. And that restriction of having to have a degree, it's like, okay, I think and believe they listened to that and said, well, all right, down the road, which I think is the beginning of next year, if not late fall this year, they will allow you to take additional education hours in order to start out. And, you know, none of our students that have gone through our program at Champions have had a problem finding an appraiser to work under with their log. but you do have to have, as you said, the experience hours as well. And we have that great prep that Jasmine talked about.
Right. So, and the other thing about being an appraiser, the reason that you need the experience is because when you think about all the kinds of constructions that we have, especially in the residential market, when you think about manufactured housing and townhouses and condos and residential freestanding houses and luxury homes, the appraiser has to be versed in a wide variety. So it does take a little while to make sure that you have the kind of experience that's needed to take care of what the lender requires. And the other thing is we protect the consumer, because nobody wants to pay more for a home than it's really worth, and no seller wants to sell a house and get less than they deserve. So we protect the consumer on both ends, both seller and buyer.
Can't you imagine taking a class with Jasmine, how much you're going to learn? And in fact, for SAE people, we have appraisal classes where you can get your SAE 30-hour requirement by taking one of those. It's very, very beneficial. Our time has flown by this morning, so I want to remind you again of go to our website. You're also going to be getting an e-blast on this, along with Logan Stout's video on the new coaching series. And as well, next month, I'll be going back to the superstar interview, our Kelly Logston Rush that you've met and know from our Plano campus. She is one of our wonderful marketing instructors. She is a long-time superstar agent with Ebby Halliday Realtors. And she is always getting top awards. I will be interviewing Kelly, and then as well David Phelan, who is with Keller Williams Premier in the Houston area, and he is one of the rising stars in the Houston area and has had his license for just a couple of years now. And I'll have the longtime experienced and the newer agent, very successful, both of them talking about their secrets to success, and that's June the 5th. So don't forget, sign up for Logan. 5 series, 90 minutes with these amazing people that are so successful in their own right, $35 a session, and or buy the package for $150. Jasmine, thank you again for being here today. I'm so proud to call you one of our champion teachers.
Well, very good. Thank you
so
for
much.
the invitation.
And thank you to all of our students for your business, and I know you learned a lot today about the real world of appraisal. So, have a great afternoon and see you next month, June the 5th at 9:30.